My parents told me to skip college so my brother could graduate debt-free. They were speechless when I returned as their bank's CEO. My parents told me college was an expense the family could not waste on me. 19 years later, they walked into their bank asking for mercy and found my name on the CEO's door. They gave my brother a debt-free future with money that belonged to me. The bank records remembered what they thought I would never discover. 19 years after my parents told me that sending me to college would be a waste, they sat across a polished conference table and asked my bank to save their house. They did not know I was the bank's new chief executive. My mother had arrived carrying a leather folder stamped with the name of Bellwether Building Supply, our family business. My father wore the navy suit he saved for funerals, loan closings, and occasions when he wanted strangers to believe he had never missed a payment. My younger brother Owen sat between them. He was 40 years old, still introduced himself as the future of the company, and had spent the previous 6 months avoiding the bank's requests for complete inventory records. They expected to meet a regional credit officer. Instead, the board secretary opened the door and introduced me. For several seconds, nobody moved. My mother looked at my name on the brass plate outside the room, then at the framed announcement behind my chair. My father stared at the annual report in front of him, as if the photograph on its first page had become a threat. Owen was the first to understand. The bank they had used for 31 years had been acquired by North Star Community Bancorp. I had been appointed to lead the combined institution. Their daughter, the one they told to delay college so her brother could graduate without debt, now had final responsibility for the bank holding their mortgage, their business loans, and the personal guarantees securing both. I did not smile. I asked the independent credit chair to join us, disclosed my relationship to the borrowers, and placed a written recusal on the table. Then I told my family that every request would be evaluated under the same rules applied to every other customer. My mother finally found her voice. She said family should matter more than rules. It was almost the same sentence she had used 19 years earlier. Back then, family had meant Owen. My name is Evelyn Bellwether. I grew up above the hardware store my grandfather opened after returning from military service. Bellwether Building Supply sold lumber, roofing, tools, and enough coffee from a dented machine near the register to keep half the contractors in our county awake. My father, Robert, inherited the store when I was 9. My mother, Diane, kept the books and made every family decision sound like an accounting necessity. Owen and I were born 14 months apart. From childhood, my parents treated that small difference as evidence that we had been designed for separate futures. Owen was called ambitious when he demanded more. I was called dependable when I surrendered it. He received new baseball equipment because scouts might notice him. I wore a cousin's old coat because I was careful with things. He was excused from weekend shifts so he could study. I opened the store at 6 because I had a good work ethic. The praise sounded generous until I understood what it purchased. Dependable children become convenient adults. By high school, I handled supplier invoices, reconciled the register, and knew which contractors paid on time. Owen talked about expanding the store into a regional chain. My father loved the way his plans sounded. I loved the numbers beneath them. That difference should have told everyone which of us understood the business. It did not. During my senior year, I was accepted into the finance program at State University. I also received an academic scholarship covering a little more than half the tuition. The remaining cost was supposed to come from an education account my grandmother Ruth had established when I was born. Grandma Ruth had been a payroll clerk for 42 years. She distrusted vague promises and believed money should always have a name attached to it. She told me the account would not make me rich. It would simply make sure no one could decide my future for me. She died when I was 16. 2 weeks after my acceptance letter arrived, my parents called a family meeting in the store's back office. My mother's ledgers had been cleared from the desk. A yellow legal pad sat in the center with 2 columns labeled Evelyn and Owen. Owen had been accepted into a private engineering college. He had no scholarship. The cost of his first year was nearly 3 times what I needed. My father explained that the business could not support both of us at once. My mother said an engineering degree would allow Owen to modernize the company, while finance was something I could learn from books and practical experience. Their proposal was presented as a temporary sacrifice. I would decline my place, work at the store for 4 years, and help support Owen. When he graduated and returned to grow the business, they would consider paying for me to attend the local community college. My scholarship could not be deferred for 4 years. My grandmother's account should have made their proposal unnecessary. When I asked about it, my mother did not look at me. She said the market had performed badly and medical expenses had reduced what remained. Then Owen said he did not want loans hanging over him when he started his career. My parents nodded as though his comfort settled the matter. I asked why debt was unacceptable for him, but losing my education was acceptable for me. My father said I was making a family decision selfish. My mother reminded me that I had always been the practical one. Owen stared at the legal pad. He did not defend me. He also did not apologize. That silence told me he had known about the plan before I entered the room. I refused. It was the first complete sentence I had ever placed between myself and my parents. The refusal did not make me brave. It made me terrified. My father leaned back as if he had been waiting for rebellion to reveal some defect in me. He said the scholarship had made me arrogant. Until that moment, I had believed scholarships were proof that someone had worked hard. In our house, mine became proof that I needed less. My mother turned the yellow pad toward me. Under Owen's name, she had listed tuition, housing, books, transportation, and spending money. Under mine, she had written one word: wait. I asked to see the statements from Grandma Ruth's account. My mother closed the ledger. She said the account was a private family matter and that questioning her bookkeeping was disrespectful. That answer frightened me more than the amount of money I was missing. Grandma had shown me a deposit slip once. I remembered the bank's green logo, the last 4 digits of the account, and the way she had tapped my name with one square fingernail. She had told me documents mattered because memories became flexible whenever money was involved. I did not understand then that she had been warning me about my own family. That afternoon, I searched the filing cabinet in the store office for an account statement. The folder labeled Ruth was empty, except for a death certificate and a bill from the funeral home. My mother found me before I could search another drawer. She did not shout. She took the cabinet key from the lock, placed it in her pocket, and told me that people who lived under someone else's roof did not conduct investigations. Then she changed the password to the family computer and removed my name from the store's bank login. Those were not the actions of a woman calmly managing a disappointing investment. They were the actions of someone controlling evidence. I did not have the language for that yet. All I had was the feeling that the floor of my childhood had shifted beneath me. Owen came to my room later. For one foolish second, I thought he had come to refuse the arrangement. Instead, he asked whether I was really going to make everyone miserable over a degree I could earn later. He said his engineering program had a direct recruiting pipeline and that graduating without loans would allow him to take risks for the business. He had memorized my parents' argument so completely that it sounded like his own. I asked whether he would trade places with me. He looked offended. That was my answer. My father said that if I chose school over the family, I would receive no help with tuition, housing, transportation, or food. My mother told me not to expect my old room to wait for me. They believed fear would restore the daughter they understood. For one night, it almost did. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with the scholarship letter in my lap and calculated the gap again and again. Even with the award, I was short enough money to make determination feel childish. The next morning, I went to Midland County Bank to ask about a student loan. I left with a teller application. The branch manager, Marisol Vega, had seen me make deposits for the store since I was 13. She knew I could balance a drawer, recognize altered checks, and speak calmly to angry contractors. She also knew the bank offered tuition assistance to employees who worked at least 30 hours a week. The program would not cover everything. Combined with my scholarship, a campus grant, and weekend work, it made college possible. I accepted before I allowed myself to be afraid. Marisol did not pretend the plan would be easy. She took a blank weekly calendar from her desk and made me account for every hour. Classes filled the middle of the day. Teller shifts covered early mornings, late afternoons, and Saturdays. Study time occupied the spaces most students used for sleep. She made me calculate tuition after assistance, rent after roommates, food, bus fare, books, and the minimum payment on a small student loan. The numbers barely closed. Then she asked whether I still wanted it. I said yes. She printed the employee tuition policy and highlighted every deadline. It was the first financial plan anyone had built around my future instead of around what could be taken from it. My parents gave me 3 days to move out. I packed my clothes, my grandmother's calculator, and the metal cash box where I kept $48 in emergency money. My mother stood in the doorway while I carried the last box downstairs. She said I would come back when I understood how expensive pride could be. I remembered those words every time I ate noodles after a closing shift. I remembered them when I slept in the living room of an apartment shared with 3 other students. I remembered them when I worked 32 hours a week and scheduled classes into every space the branch could spare. The first month nearly proved them right. I missed a bus after an evening economics exam and walked 4 miles in shoes meant for the teller line. A professor refused to accept an assignment that was 9 minutes late. One roommate moved out without paying her share of the electric bill. At the branch, my smile began to feel like another uniform. One Friday, my drawer was short by $100. I counted it 6 times with shaking hands. Losing the job would mean losing tuition assistance. Losing tuition assistance would mean losing school. The entire structure of my new life rested on a difference small enough to disappear inside a stack of 20s. Marisol locked the drawer, reviewed the camera, and found that a cash delivery had been recorded incorrectly before my shift began. She corrected the ledger. Then she made me sit in the break room until my hands stopped shaking. She told me that responsibility did not mean automatically accepting blame. It meant preserving the facts long enough to find the truth. That lesson became the foundation of my career. It also became the boundary my parents could no longer cross. Pride was expensive. So was being treated as disposable. At first, the bank was only a way to stay in school. Then it became the place where I understood what power actually looked like. It was not the loudest person in a room. It was the person who knew what had been promised, what had been signed, what could be proved, and what would happen next. Marisol taught me to read a loan file from the collateral backward. She showed me how a profitable business could fail from poor cash flow, and how a charming borrower could hide danger beneath fast growth. She also taught me that fairness was not softness. Fairness required clear rules before you knew whose name would appear on the application. I finished my first year with a 3.8 average. Owen came home for the summer in a new car my parents said he needed for internships. I learned about it from a photograph posted by an aunt. My own car had failed 2 months earlier. I walked to the branch in rain until Marisol helped me find a used bicycle. At Thanksgiving, my mother called and invited me to dinner on the condition that I not discuss money or make Owen feel guilty. I went because I still believed distance could be repaired by behaving perfectly. The dining room displayed Owen's college photograph in a silver frame. My scholarship certificate, once placed beside it, had disappeared. During dinner, my father described Owen's degree as the family's investment. When an uncle asked about my classes, my mother answered for me. She said I was taking a few courses while working at the bank. I was carrying a full course load. I corrected her once. The table became quiet. Then Owen announced that he had been accepted into an unpaid summer program, and my parents celebrated the opportunity. I understood that the truth would never compete successfully with the version of our family they preferred. I left before dessert. That was the last holiday I spent in their house for 11 years. During my second year, I moved from the teller line to deposit operations. The work was less visible and more complicated. I reviewed return checks, suspicious transfers, forged endorsements, and the quiet mistakes that could empty an account without anyone raising a voice. One afternoon, an elderly customer named Mrs. Klein came in because her nephew had begun writing checks from her account. He had permission to buy groceries, but not to pay his gambling debts. Mrs. Klein kept apologizing for causing trouble. Her nephew kept saying they were family. The phrase made something cold move through me. Marisol helped her revoke the authorization, document the checks, and move the remaining funds into a protected account. No one told Mrs. Klein that being related to the person who harmed her made the harm less real. No one asked whether stopping him was selfish. I began to understand why my mother's refusal to show me Grandma's records had bothered me so deeply. Money leaves tracks. People who insist there is nothing to see are often the ones most afraid of a statement. I requested a copy of the trust record from the branch that had handled Grandma's account. The employee searched under my name and found nothing in the active system. Records older than 7 years were stored on microfilm and could be released only through the trustee or a legal request. I had neither. My parents had also kept Grandma's will. I was 19, exhausted, and unable to afford an attorney. I wrote down everything I remembered and stored the page with my scholarship papers. Then I returned to work. Survival sometimes means postponing a question without agreeing to forget it. Owen's life moved in the opposite direction. He joined a fraternity, spent a semester abroad, and appeared in photographs from ski weekends my parents described as networking. When he changed majors after his first year, no one called the lost credits wasteful. When I dropped one elective because my branch schedule changed, my mother heard through a cousin and sent a note saying, Perhaps I was finally becoming realistic. I stopped opening her envelopes before exams. By my third year, I was training new tellers. By my fourth, I was assisting the commercial lending department with spreading financial statements. I learned to separate revenue from cash, collateral from hope, and growth from health. Bellwether Building Supply had taught me the vocabulary of small business. The bank taught me what happened when pride replaced controls. For a capstone project, I analyzed why family-owned companies failed during leadership transitions. The most common problem was not lack of talent, it was entitlement protected from honest reporting. I removed the Bellwether name from my draft before submitting it. The professor wrote one sentence across the final page. "You understand the human risk behind the numbers." I kept that paper longer than I kept my diploma. College took me 5 years instead of 4. I graduated without ceremony tickets for my parents and with $12,000 in loans. Marisol sat in the front row. She cried when my name was called. I did not. I had learned that some victories are too heavy for tears until much later. Midland promoted me into credit analysis. 2 years later, I moved to North Star Community Bank, a larger institution in the state capital, and entered its management program. I studied at night for a graduate degree. I examined failed construction loans during the recession, rebuilt a small business underwriting team, and learned how quickly a bank could destroy a town by treating people as numbers. I also learned how quickly a bank could destroy itself by treating rules as optional for familiar customers. That lesson followed me through every promotion. My first major assignment at North Star involved 12 construction loans that had been approved during a property boom. On paper, every project was current. In reality, interest reserves were being used to hide stalled buildings, inspectors were copying old photographs, and one developer had pledged the same equipment to 3 lenders. The senior executive overseeing the portfolio wanted more time before reporting the problems. He said disclosure would make the losses real. I told him the losses were already real. Delay would only decide who discovered them first. I documented my analysis, sent it through the formal risk channel, and expected my career to end. Instead, the board ordered an independent review. North Star recognized the losses early, protected its depositors, and negotiated workouts before the market deteriorated further. The executive resigned. I was promoted into his recovery team. That experience taught me that institutions fail in the same way families do. Someone powerful prefers a comforting story. Everyone else is asked to protect it. Years later, during a regional recession, I led a program for small manufacturers whose orders had disappeared faster than their fixed costs. We did not forgive every loan or pretend every company could survive. We required honest books, independent valuations, owner contributions, and weekly cash reporting. Businesses that could recover received time. Owners who diverted money or falsified collateral faced enforcement. The distinction mattered. Mercy without facts rewards the person best at creating damage. Discipline without judgment destroys people who are already telling the truth. Our team preserved more than 800 jobs while reducing North Star's expected losses. The board began sending me into problems where numbers and human consequences could not be separated. I integrated branches after 2 acquisitions. I closed offices that existed only because senior executives liked their addresses. I expanded lending in rural counties where profitable customers had been ignored because their loans were too small to impress anyone. I created a policy requiring every executive conflict to be disclosed before a credit decision, not after someone objected. At the time, I did not know that policy would one day govern my own family. My rise was not smooth. I was passed over for regional president in favor of a man who had managed half as many employees and none of the troubled portfolios. The chairman told me I was indispensable in risk. I understood the trap. Dependable women are often praised most warmly when someone wants them to remain where the difficult work is hidden. I asked for the written criteria for the position. Then I built a record against every one of them. I took responsibility for retail operations, learned technology conversion, presented quarterly results to the board, and completed a graduate degree in banking leadership. When the regional presidency opened again, the board could no longer describe me as support. I had already been doing the job. 3 years later, a ransomware attack struck North Star on a holiday weekend. We isolated the affected systems before customer accounts were altered, opened manual service desks in 24 branches, and communicated the disruption before rumors could fill the silence. I spent 72 hours in the operations center. The public saw a calm press conference. The board saw the decisions that made calm possible. That crisis moved me from president of community banking to chief risk officer, then to chief operating officer. When our chief executive announced his retirement, the board conducted a national search. I was not chosen because I had once been a poor girl with an unfair family. Most directors did not know that story. I was chosen because I had managed credit losses, growth, acquisitions, technology failures, regulatory exams, and the trust of communities that remembered every broken promise. The final vote was unanimous. Every title had arrived after work my family never saw. They saw pieces through local news and relatives, but acknowledgement would have required revising the story they had told about me. My mother occasionally mailed birthday cards addressed to Miss Evelyn Bellwether, as if professionalism could replace affection. My father left 2 voicemails over the years. Both asked whether I could introduce Owen to someone. Owen graduated debt-free. My parents had paid his tuition, apartment, car, and living expenses. He returned to Bellwether Building Supply with an engineering degree and no interest in the daily work that had kept the store alive. Within 3 years, he opened 2 new locations. Within 5, he built a distribution warehouse on borrowed money. Local newspapers called him the visionary successor. My father carried copies of the article in his truck. From a distance, the growth looked impressive. From the financial statements available through industry reports, it looked thin. Inventory climbed faster than sales. Receivables aged. Margins fell. Owen funded permanent expansion with a revolving line meant for seasonal purchases. I never saw the private loan files. I did not need them to recognize the pattern. I also knew better than to become involved. My career had taught me that family problems become professional disasters the moment someone assumes boundaries are negotiable. North Star began considering an acquisition of Midland County Bank 18 years after I first walked into its lobby. Midland had loyal customers and deep local deposits, but its technology was old, and its commercial loan portfolio had weakened. The board asked me to lead due diligence because I understood both community banking and credit risk. I disclosed that my family borrowed from Midland. The acquisition committee created a formal conflict protocol. I would not review bellwether accounts, participate in their classification, or receive non-public details beyond what my executive role required after decisions had been made. I signed the restriction gladly. There is a difference between avoiding the truth and protecting the integrity of how truth is found. The acquisition closed 14 months later. Midland County Bank kept its name for local branches, but North Star supplied the capital, systems, and leadership. The board appointed me chief executive of the combined bank. The announcement included a photograph taken in the lobby where Marisol had once handed me a teller application. She had retired by then. I sent her the first printed copy. She called before the ink on the announcement was dry. She did not congratulate me first. She asked whether I had eaten. Then she reminded me that becoming chief executive did not make me the owner of the bank's rules. It made me their most visible guardian. I wrote the sentence inside the cover of my board notebook. The acquisition team spent months preparing for customers who would fear that North Star had come to erase Midland's identity. We kept local loan officers where their records were sound. We replaced obsolete security systems, increased deposit insurance education, and created an appeal process for borrowers whose files were reclassified. I held town halls in school gyms and county meeting rooms. At one of them, an employee from Bellwether Building Supply asked whether the bank planned to close businesses that had been customers for decades. I answered that longevity earned careful attention, not immunity from facts. I did not know the condition of Bellwether's private loans then. I only knew the answer had to remain true when the customer became personal. My parents did not contact me. 3 weeks after the announcement, the independent credit team classified Bellwether Building Supply as distressed. I received only the notice required by the conflict policy. The company had violated several loan covenants. It had failed to provide verified inventory reports. Property taxes were overdue. The warehouse line had been drawn to its maximum limit. Most seriously, the bank could not confirm that all collateral listed in the borrowing base still existed. The special committee later reconstructed how the problem had grown. For years, Midland's former commercial manager had renewed the Bellwether line based on internally prepared statements because Robert Bellwether was considered a pillar of the county. Exceptions were recorded, approved, and forgotten. Owen learned that missing documents produced reminders, but not consequences. He delayed appraisals, estimated inventory in round numbers, and moved slow stock between locations before inspections. Every small accommodation taught him that the next one would also be granted. By the time North Star's system demanded verifiable records, Bellwether was not suffering from one bad quarter. It was carrying years of decisions that had never been forced to meet evidence. The independent credit chair, Nathan Cole, had no history with my family. That was why I wanted him in the room. Before the meeting, Ethics Council reviewed the recusal with every participant. I could explain the combined bank's policy and listen to information any chief executive would receive. I could not vote, negotiate terms, recommend enforcement, or contact the lending team privately. Every page provided to me would be copied to the special committee. Every family communication would go to council. The restrictions were not ceremonial. They protected the bank from me and me from the accusation that eventually came. The credit chair scheduled a meeting with the guarantors. My parents requested the chief executive attend because of the size of their relationship. They did not realize who that executive was. That was how they arrived in my boardroom with a leather folder, a failing company, and 19 years of silence between us. After I disclosed the conflict, Owen pushed a restructuring proposal across the table. He wanted the bank to extend the line, capitalize missed interest, release my parents' house from their guarantee, and lend another $2 million for an online expansion. The projections assumed sales would rise 40% in 1 year. There was no independent market study. The collateral schedule contained round numbers, where serial numbers and locations should have been. My father said the bank had always trusted the Bellwether name. The independent credit chair said trust did not replace documentation. My mother looked at me. She expected me to overrule him. I reminded her that I had recused myself. She called it convenient. I agreed. Rules are supposed to be convenient when the alternative is favoritism. The bank gave Bellwether 10 business days to provide complete records. On the 9th day, Owen submitted inventory certificates showing nearly $4 million in lumber, roofing material, and equipment at the distribution warehouse. The certificates carried my father's electronic approval. The independent team hired an outside field examiner. The warehouse contained less than half the reported inventory. Several stacks of lumber belonged to suppliers under consignment agreements and could not be pledged to the bank. 3 forklifts listed as collateral had been sold months earlier. Photographs in the inspection reports had been reused from prior quarters. The file was no longer simply a troubled loan. It was potential fraud. The bank froze further advances and referred the matter to outside counsel. I remained outside the investigative chain. My family did not respect that boundary. My father came to my office without an appointment. He said Owen had made mistakes under pressure and that no one benefited if the bank treated paperwork like a crime. My mother sent a letter listing everything they claimed to have done for me as a child. It included food, school clothes, and a bedroom. It did not include college. Owen called from 3 different numbers. He accused me of waiting 19 years for a chance to humiliate him. The accusation would have been easier to dismiss if part of me had not wanted the moment to feel satisfying. I had imagined my parents seeing my title. I had imagined them understanding what they had misjudged. But revenge looks different when 200 employees, their health insurance, and a town's largest independent supplier stand behind the people who hurt you. I did not want to save Owen from consequences. I also did not want innocent workers to become collateral in a family lesson. I asked the board to appoint a special committee with authority over every Bellwether decision. The committee retained a restructuring firm and a forensic accountant. My only instruction was the same one I would have given for any distressed borrower. Protect the bank. Preserve viable jobs where possible. Document everything. The forensic review found more than missing lumber. Owen had created a second company called OBC Logistics. Bellwether paid OBC inflated transportation fees. OBC then used the money to cover payments on Owen's lake house, private club membership, and a failed restaurant investment. My parents owned 5% of OBC on paper. They claimed they did not know the company existed. Their signatures appeared on the formation documents. Owen said they had signed a stack of routine papers without reading them. That explanation might have protected them from one accusation. It exposed the truth of another. They had handed him authority because they believed his success was the family's destiny. They had questioned nothing. The same people who demanded proof that my education was worth funding had given Owen millions of dollars and their signatures on faith. Outside counsel prepared a civil complaint seeking repayment, preservation of collateral, and appointment of a receiver. Before filing, the bank offered one final consensual restructuring. Owen had to resign. The lake house and other diverted assets had to be surrendered. My parents had to honor a negotiated portion of their guarantees. The profitable retail locations would be sold to an employee-led company, financed by a new, independently underwritten loan. The warehouse would close. Most jobs would survive. The Bellwether family would lose control. My parents asked to meet me alone. I refused. The special committee attended. My mother cried before the meeting began. She said they had made one difficult decision when I was 18, and I had punished them ever since. I told her I had not created Owen's false inventory reports, signed their guarantees, or moved company money into his personal accounts. My father said I could make the problem disappear with one phone call. I said that if a chief executive could erase fraud for her family, no customer should trust the bank with $1. Then my mother returned to the old argument. Owen had needed a debt-free start because he was supposed to carry the family business. I asked what they believed I had needed. Neither answered. The silence in that room was different from the silence at the dinner table years earlier. Back then, they had been certain my future mattered less. Now they had no version of events that survived the evidence in front of them. They signed the restructuring term sheet 2 days later. Owen refused. He transferred money from OBC Logistics to an account outside the state and attempted to sell equipment covered by the bank's lien. The field examiner had already recorded every serial number. The prospective buyer contacted the bank when the lien search showed the equipment was pledged. The attempted sale gave outside counsel the evidence needed to obtain an emergency order. A receiver took control of the business the following morning. The receiver's first priority was payroll. Bellwether had enough cash for 9 days. Several vendors had stopped delivering, and a health insurance premium was overdue. Owen had spent the previous month assuring employees that the bank was attacking a perfectly healthy company. The books showed something else. The downtown store and one suburban location were profitable. The warehouse and Owen's newest branch consumed cash. Managers had been ordering inventory to qualify for supplier rebates, while invoices from earlier orders remained unpaid. The employee pension contribution had been delayed twice. Those facts transformed the restructuring from a family confrontation into a race. If suppliers filed competing claims or employees left all at once, even the viable stores would collapse. The special committee approved emergency receiver financing under strict controls. No money could flow to my family. Payroll, insurance, essential inventory, and customer deposits were paid directly. The receiver published weekly reports so employees did not have to choose between Owen's accusations and the bank's silence. I attended none of the negotiations. I received the same board summaries as other directors and asked only whether the process matched policy. The discipline felt unsatisfying. That was how I knew it was necessary. Revenge would have put me at the center. Integrity required me to step away while the evidence did its work. Owen blamed me publicly. He posted that a bitter sister had weaponized a bank to steal the company she once abandoned. For 48 hours, local comments repeated his version. Then the receiver filed the first report. It included photographs of empty warehouse sections, duplicate inventory certificates, invoices from OBC Logistics, and records tracing business funds to Owen's personal expenses. The bank made no emotional statement. Evidence did not need one. The employee purchase closed 4 months later. 163 jobs were preserved. The original downtown store remained open under the name Bellwether Employee Supply because the workers had built more of its reputation than any member of my family. My parents sold their large house and moved into a small condominium. The proceeds satisfied part of their guarantees. They were not left destitute. They were simply required to live inside the consequences they had spent years assuming someone else would absorb. Owen faced civil claims and a criminal investigation for bank fraud and asset diversion. I did not attend his hearings. I thought that was the end. 6 months after the restructuring, our legal department began digitizing Midland's oldest trust records. A compliance analyst called my board-appointed ethics counsel about an account bearing my name. Because of my conflict, the original documents went first to outside counsel and the audit committee. Only after they were secured, indexed, and reviewed was I allowed to see copies. The first page carried my grandmother Ruth's signature. She had not opened a simple savings account. She had created an irrevocable education trust containing $46,000, with me as the only beneficiary. The money could be paid directly to an accredited school or released to me at age 25. My parents had no authority to use it for Owen. 3 months after Grandma died, the entire balance had been withdrawn. The file contained a beneficiary consent form stating I had chosen not to attend college and authorized the funds to be redirected toward another family member's education. The signature was supposed to be mine. It was not. I had been 16 on the date it was signed. I had also been at a statewide academic competition 200 miles away. The academic competition had kept records. My registration form showed the arrival time. A team photograph carried that day's newspaper in the front row. The hotel invoice had been paid by my school district. My supposed signature had been notarized at my mother's bookkeeping office at 11 that morning. The notary journal listed no identification document. The beneficiary consent form used a version of my signature copied from a permission slip I had signed the previous semester. Even the copying was careless. The original permission slip contained a small ink break where my pen had skipped over a fold. The same break appeared on the consent form. Outside counsel found both documents in separate archives. Placed beside each other, they looked less like signatures than carbon copies of a decision made without me. The withdrawal itself had been divided into 3 cashier's checks. 2 went directly to Owens College. The third entered Bellwether Building Supplies operating account and was used 5 days later for Owens' housing deposit and a new vehicle. My mother had told me market losses and medical bills consumed the account. There had been no market loss. There had been no medical payment. There had only been a paper trail designed to convert my grandmother's instruction into my brother's advantage. The old Midland file also contained a handwritten note from a junior employee who had questioned whether a minor could consent to changing the beneficiary purpose. Her supervisor had written that the Bellwethers were long-standing customers and that Diane was a notary. The employee's concern had been initialed and ignored. I asked the audit committee to locate her. She had left banking years earlier after being criticized for being too cautious. The bank sent her a formal acknowledgement that her concern had been valid. I understood her more than anyone in the room realized. Institutions often call women difficult when they refuse to make inconvenient facts disappear. The bank had accepted the form without independent verification. My mother had notarized it using her bookkeeping office commission. My father had signed as witness. Tuition records showed the money went to Owen's first 2 years of college. The legal pad in the back office had never represented a new family sacrifice. My parents had already taken my protected education money before they asked me to surrender my future. The meeting had been designed to make me consent after the fact. When I refused, they lied about losses and medical bills, then forced me from the house so I would have fewer chances to ask questions. For years, I had believed they chose Owen when resources became scarce. The documents proved something worse. The resources had been mine. They chose to steal them. The audit committee reported the old control failure to regulators and the bank's insurer. I recused myself from every decision. An outside institution calculated the trust balance, lost growth, and interest. Midland's successor bank restored the money under a settlement approved without my participation. It then pursued recovery from the people who submitted the fraudulent withdrawal. My parents received the demand letters on the same day. My mother called me for the first time in years without asking for Owen. She said the signature had been a technical solution to a family problem. I told her forgery was not a family word for sacrifice. She said Grandma would have wanted both grandchildren educated. I said Grandma had written exactly what she wanted, and they altered it because they disliked her answer. My father took the phone. He said I had succeeded anyway, so the money had done no lasting harm. That sentence released something in me. For 19 years, part of me had been waiting for proof that they understood. I finally realized understanding was not required for accountability. I told him my success did not convert their theft into good parenting. Then I ended the call. The bank's recovery case settled after handwriting analysis, notary records, school payment receipts, and archived teller logs were exchanged. The settlement could not return the years I spent calculating whether I could afford dinner. It could not recreate a graduation where my parents sat in the audience, but it corrected the record. The bank amended the trust history, reported the notarial misconduct, and adopted a rule requiring independent verification before any education trust could be redirected, even when every person requesting the change was related. I insisted the policy be named after the control failure, not after me. Personal pain had exposed the weakness. The correction needed to protect strangers. My parents surrendered the remaining proceeds from a vacation property and issued no public statement. Owen claimed he had never known the money came from my trust. That may have been true when he was 19. It was not true after the forensic accountant found an email my mother sent him during his second year. She told him not to discuss Evelyn's account because I was being difficult and would calm down once I accepted my place in the family. He had replied with 2 words: he understood. That email ended the last excuse available to him. Owen had not designed the theft when he was a teenager, but he had learned of it while there was still time to tell me, refuse the remaining payments, or at least acknowledge what had been done. He chose silence because silence was profitable. Years later, when he falsified inventory and moved money through OBC logistics, he was repeating the first financial lesson our parents had taught him. If the money helped him, someone else could be required to absorb the loss. The criminal case focused on the business records, not my trust. Owen eventually pleaded guilty to bank fraud and unlawful transfer of secured assets. The judge ordered restitution and imposed a sentence that included prison, followed by supervised release. My parents wrote to the court asking for leniency. They described him as a devoted son who had carried impossible pressure. They did not mention the employees whose insurance nearly lapsed, the suppliers left unpaid, or the sister whose education account had been used to remove debt from his life before he was old enough to understand what debt meant. I did not submit a victim statement. The bank and the receiver had complete records. My absence was not forgiveness. It was refusal to let another stage of Owen's life require my presence. There was no dramatic courtroom confession. There did not need to be. The timestamps, signatures, tuition transfers, and archived records said everything my family would not. I used part of the restored trust money to repay the student loans I had carried into adulthood. I placed the rest into a scholarship fund for students who worked at least 20 hours a week while enrolled. The fund was named for Ruth Bellwether, not for me. My grandmother had tried to give one girl a choice. I wanted her intention to survive the people who had violated it. Marisol attended the first scholarship ceremony. She was 73 and still carried tissues in every pocket. The first recipient was a grocery cashier studying accounting. When I handed her the award letter, she read the amount twice before looking up. I recognized the expression. It was the face of someone discovering that the distance between a plan and a life had suddenly become crossable. The scholarship required no performance of gratitude. Recipients did not have to tell a sad story, publish their photographs, or promise to make the foundation proud. They had to remain enrolled, meet an academic threshold, and provide proof of employment. The money went directly to tuition and books. I had spent too much of my life watching help become a leash. Ruth's fund would be a bridge. Nothing more would be demanded in return. The employee-owned supply company survived its first year. It closed the oversized warehouse, negotiated new vendor terms, and promoted the operations manager Owen had ignored. The company posted a modest profit and restored the missed pension contribution. At the annual town meeting, employees voted to shorten the name to Bellwether Supply Cooperative. They kept my grandfather's surname, but not my family's control. I approved of the distinction. Legacies should belong to the people who maintain them, not automatically to the people who inherit the sign. 2 years after the restructuring, the Ruth Bellwether Fund had supported 11 students. The scholarship committee published the rules, recorded every decision, and required members to disclose personal relationships before reviewing an application. Those controls were ordinary. That was why they mattered. At the scholarship ceremony 3 years later, she returned as a volunteer reviewer. She checked the tuition invoices twice and apologized for being cautious. I told her caution had once been the most generous thing anyone offered me. My parents did not attend. They sent a letter through their attorney asking whether we could begin again without discussing money, the business, or the criminal case. The request sounded peaceful because it required silence from the person who had been harmed. I answered in writing. I would consider limited contact if they could acknowledge the forged consent form, the trust withdrawal, and the years they spent calling my resistance selfish. I did not demand public humiliation. I did not demand that they choose me over Owen. I asked only that any future relationship begin with an accurate record. They did not reply for 8 months. Then a small insured package arrived at my office. Inside was Grandma Ruth's calculator, the one I thought I had carried from home at 18. Mine had actually been an identical spare. The original still had her initials scratched beneath the battery cover and a strip of yellow tape across the back with my name written in her square hand. My mother included no apology. She wrote only that the calculator had always belonged to me. It was not enough to repair a family. It was enough to prove that even she could no longer pretend ownership was whatever the bellwethers decided it should be. I placed the calculator in the scholarship office beside a copy of Ruth's Trust. One had helped me understand numbers. The other had taught me why numbers needed records. That night, Marisol asked whether becoming CEO had felt the way I imagined. It had not. The title did not heal the bedroom I lost at 18. It did not replace the graduation photograph my parents never displayed. It did not make Owen's fall feel like my victory. What it gave me was smaller and more valuable. It gave me the authority to prove that rules could remain intact even when breaking them would benefit me. My parents had always confused love with exemption. They believed family meant the favored person should never carry debt, hear no, or face consequences. I built my life around a different definition. Family should not require one child to disappear so another can shine. Opportunity should not depend on who is considered more promising. And success should never be used to excuse the harm required to achieve it. 19 years after my parents told me to skip college, they entered their bank expecting my signature to rescue everything they had given my brother. They left without control of the company, without protection from the guarantees they signed, and without the story that I had simply been too selfish to help. I did not use the bank to destroy them. I used the bank correctly. Their own records did the rest.